Hi, I'm Bob. Welcome back to the solutions to the exercises at the end of Chapter 4 about the cost of living adjustment. We will learn the Consumer Price Index, CPI, as a measure of inflation. We will compare the CPI-based cost of living adjustment and the true cost of living adjustment. Let's get started. Here is exercise 4.1. Alice consumes only coffee and coffee cake and only consumes them together. They are perfect complements. If we calculate a CPI using only these two goods, how much will this CPI differ from the true cost of living index? For perfect complements, the CPI-based cost of living adjustment is exactly the true cost of living adjustment, because there's no substitution effect of the price changes for perfect complements. The substitution bias does not exist. The CPI reflects the true cost of living index. Let's do exercise 4.2. The consumer views coffee and cream as perfect complements. In the first year, she picks an optimal bundle of coffee and cream, E1. In the second year, inflation occurs. The prices of coffee and cream change by different amounts, and she receives a cost of living adjustment based on the Consumer Price Index, CPI, for these two goods. After the price changes and she receives the cost of living adjustment, her new optimal bundle is E2. So the two equilibria in the figure: is she better off, worse off, or equally well off at E2 compared to E1? Explain. As shown in the diagram, the budget line before the price change is L1. The highest indifference curve, I, touches the budget line at the optimal bundle E1. After the price change, the budget line L2 has a different slope. Because the relative price of Q1 to Q2 is different. L2 goes through E1 because with the CPI-based cost of living adjustment, the consumer can purchase the same bundle as before the price change. Her new optimal bundle remains the same because there is no substitution effect of the price change for perfect complements. The optimal bundles E1 and E2 are at the same indifference curve, so she is equally well off. Let's solve exercise 4.3. Anne's only income is her annual college scholarship, which she spends exclusively on gallons of ice cream and books. Last year, when ice cream cost $10 and used books cost $20, Anne spent her $250 scholarship on 5 gallons of ice cream and 10 books. This year, the price of ice cream rose to $15 and the price of books increased to $25, so that Anne can afford the same bundle of ice cream and books that she bought last year. Her college raised her scholarship to $325. Anne has the usual shaped indifference curves. Will Anne change the amount of ice cream and books that she buys this year? If so, explain how and why. Will Anne be better off, as well off, or worse off this year than last year? Why? Since Anne has the usual shaped indifference curves that are convex to the origin, she will substitute toward the relatively less expensive goods when prices change. The relative price of ice cream to books was 10/20 last year, and it is 15/25 this year. Ice cream becomes relatively more expensive this year, and will buy more books and less ice cream this year. As shown in the diagram, her new budget line L2 is deeper than the old one L1 because ice cream becomes relatively more expensive. L2 goes through the original bundle E1 because the CPI-based cost of living adjustment allows her to purchase the same bundle as last year. Her new optimal bundle, however, is E2, where a higher indifference curve I2 is tangent to L2, and is better off with more books and less ice cream. Let's find answers to exercise 4.4. The Economist magazine publishes the Big Mac Index, which is based on the price of a Big Mac at McDonald's in various countries over time. Under what circumstances would people find this index to be as useful as or more useful than the Consumer Price Index in measuring how their true cost of living changes over time? The CPI-based cost of living adjustment incorrectly assumes that the consumers do not substitute toward relatively less expensive goods when prices change, but keep buying the same bundle of goods over time. It overestimates the amount of inflation because of the substitution bias. The Big Mac Index also has the same problem. When we use it, we assume consumers purchase the same amount of Big Macs. However, the relative price of the hamburger to all other goods may change over time, and substitution occurs between the hamburger and the other goods. Consider an extreme case when the Big Mac becomes extremely expensive. People can eat other things, and the cost of living should not increase a lot. But the Big Mac Index will be very high in this case. It is worse than the CPI, which is the average price of a basket of goods. Since both of them suffer from substitution bias, it is hard to tell which one is better. It depends on how large is the substitution bias due to the relative price change. Let's solve exercise 4.5. During his first year at school, the consumer buys 8 new college textbooks at a cost of $50 each. Used books cost $30 each. When the bookstore announces a 20% price increase in new textbooks and a 10% increase in used textbooks for the next year, his father offers him $80 extra. Is he better off, the same, or worse off after the price change? Why? As long as the consumer has the usual shaped indifference curves, that are convex to the origin. The inflation-based cost of living adjustment always makes the consumer better off because she can substitute toward the relatively less expensive goods and achieve a higher utility level. But in this exercise, the consumer's indifference curves are not the usual shape. The corner solution happens when the indifference curves are straight lines. He spends his entire income on new books because his indifference curves are steeper than his budget line L1. The optimal bundle is E1. After the prices change, the relative price of new books to used books becomes higher, and therefore the new budget line L2 becomes steeper. We consider two situations. If the new budget line L2 is still flatter than the indifference curves, his optimal bundle remains unchanged after the cost of living adjustment. He is equally well off in this situation. If the new budget line L2 is steeper than the indifference curves, his optimal bundle will move to E2. He will purchase only the used books and buy no new books. The substitution effect leads to a higher utility because a higher indifference curve touches L2. He will be better off in this situation. In both situations, he will not be worse off. Let's solve exercise 4.6. Use a graph to illustrate that the Paasche cost of living index underestimates the rate of inflation when compared to the true cost of living index. The Paasche cost of living index weights prices using the new quantity of goods purchased instead of the old bundle as in the Laspeyres index. It is about how much we should take away from the consumer so that she has the same utility as after the price increase. The budget line before the price increase is L1, and the budget line after the price increase is L2. The Paasche cost of living adjustment allows the consumer to purchase the bundle E2. So the budget line L3 goes through the bundle E2. But this adjustment, that is, the money taken away from the consumer, is smaller than it should be. The true adjustment should be larger so that the budget line is L star, which is tangent to I2. The Paasche cost of living adjustment is smaller than the true cost of living adjustment. The Paasche cost of living index underestimates the rate of inflation. Let's find answers to exercise 4.7. The application reducing the CPI substitution bias discusses the new inflation index, the CPI, which averages the Laspeyres and Paasche indexes. Given an example of circumstances such that the traditional CPI index would be superior to the new one. When there's no substitution effect of the price change, the traditional CPI index is the true cost of living adjustment measure. It's better than the new one because the average of the Laspeyres and Paasche indexes involves more data collection and computation. Let's solve exercise 4.8. The consumer buys gasoline and other goods. The government considers imposing a lump sum tax, L dollars per person, or a specific tax on gasoline of T dollars per gallon. Given that either tax will raise the same amount of tax revenue from the consumer, Which tax does she prefer and why? Show your answer using a graph or calculus. Suppose the pre-tax optimal bundle is E1. The specific tax rotates the budget line from L1 to L2. The after-tax optimal bundle is E2, where L2 is tangent to I2. The lump sum tax shifts L1 to L star, and L star goes through E2. With the lump sum tax, the consumer can choose E3, where L star is tangent to a higher indifference curve I3. The consumer prefers the lump sum tax. Let's do exercise 4.9. The price of a serving of McDonald's French fries in 1950 was 10 cents. Using the internet, determine the price of fries today. Based on the federal government's urban CPI index data, has the real price of French fries increased? The price of French fries today is $3.19. From the website, we find that the CPI for 1950 was 24.1, and that for September 2023 was 307.8. We can calculate the price of the 1950 French fries in 2023 dollars. If we could have purchased the French fries in 1950 with 2023 dollars, the French fries would have cost $1.28. We actually pay $3.19 in 2023. The real price of French fries has increased if they are the same size. Thank you for watching this video and subscribing to my YouTube channel. See you next time.